Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Nevers, a great series premiere. That was a really interesting situation. I do like that. I mean, the only reason why you kind of have some idea of what's going on is because of the trailer, but I like how the first episode actually doesn't show you what exactly happened. It just shows you, like, we get looks at some of our future, like, touched, individuals, but then, like, it's not to the end of the episode that we'll actually get to see, which I'll go ahead and talk about that. I think that's so fascinating. I was wondering, like, was it like just a supernatural phenomenon? It was literally an alien spaceship or something that flew above London and was just dropping particles that absorbed into everybody. And now this is also the big question I have about the touch. I'm also going to say this ahead of time. Forgive me in advance. I'm going to mix this up with the word trouble because I have it in my head because it makes me think of the troubled from Haven. That being people who had supernatural abilities in the show Haven. So I'm going to probably get those words mixed up a lot. Touched and troubled. I'm just forewarning you, and I apologize in advance. But it makes me wonder because as we see at the end of the episode how that whole situation operates, like obviously where it lands on people kind of dictated where their powers came from. Because we see at one point Mary, like one goes to her throat, but some people like Amalia had like those orbs like land all over their her body. I think this because we definitely see only like one kind of fall on Penance, which I also appreciate. I think it's so interesting. Like Amalia's last name is True, and Penance's is Adair. I just think that's so interesting. I thought it was literally Dare, but it's Adair. Just looking it up before I started recording, but I just thought that was interesting. But like even like the whole situation with Augustus, for example, like him having it seemed like it would start off in his cheek and then like it either moved to his head or so we don't know. But it's interesting because I'm wondering it's because it hit Amalia in all those different spots. Like, is that supposed to insinuate she actually has more powers than she thinks, or is it the more you got hit with, the more elaborate your ability is, or something like that? Because, like I said, Penance only like extended her hand out and one touched her. So I don't know. I'm overthinking it, but it's just interesting. Another element I'm also curious about is there kind of a nature to it in the sense that every ability exists as sort of a balance. So all the abilities that exist out there, there's some sort of balance to them that they kind of coexist. Like, for example, as we see, I know I'm skipping ahead a lot, but Mary, for example, when she played her song, it resonates with people who are touched. So I'm wondering, like, that has to be an ability that has to come about on purpose. Like, I mean, we don't know what else it does, but it does seem like, in particular, it seems like it enchants those who are touched. Normal people were completely unaffected, and I love how the camera actually shows you too from an outside perspective. To normal people, it looks like nothing's going on, but to everyone that's touched, they can see it because it resonates with them. So I guess she's supposed to be the beacon. She's the one that's supposed to bring everything together. So I guess that's kind of like the true purpose of kind of her siren song type of situation. I don't know. I'm wondering, is like I said, is there a nature to everyone else's abilities, kind of in a similar vein? Another thing I was misconstrued about going into this is, because the trailers kind of lean into it, is that all the touched people are women. It's like not the case. Most of them are women, but they like even Lord was it Masson's who's played by Pip Torrens. I know best as like Hair Star from Preacher, so that was interesting. His whole thing may imply that it's like certain men in a sense. He almost made it sound like it's not like men that are different from, like, it's almost like, oh, if you're I don't know, like if you're not like all the non-strong men were kind of affected. So as we can see, it is affected people of color. It is affected like other, but that's the thing of like why certain people have it while others don't. Maybe it's supposed to be those who are kind of outsiders, who might be those who are disenfranchised, because even like Lord Masson's is kind of saying like, oh no, this is like an attack, like this attack happened 3 years ago. They attacked by controlling our women, like, because to him it seems like this is the beginning strike of something else. That's why he's so weary of the touch. We also learned another reason why is because his daughter is touched too, and We don't know whether like she's in a coma because of it or she died because of it. Whatever the case may be, it seems like he holds some resentment. It is interesting that like we have 3 years, enough time for like the lore and understanding of this to kind of get built out, but still be early enough in the stages to be like, we don't fully understand this either. So I think that's kind of interesting. At the same time, you also have like a serial killer malady running around, and the whole question is, well, is she just a regular serial killer or is she a touch serial killer? There's also the thing of like, yeah, because everyone's walking down the street wondering like, oh, is this woman I'm coming across, is she touch, is she malady? Every touch person they come across, is that malady or something like that, because no one knew her identity. Just, yeah, because I think the kid with the newspaper saying that basically she's at victim number 5, so she's soon going to surpass Jack the Ripper. Because that was even a conversation. It's like, oh, she's not killing whores. These are respectable men, which shows you just kind of like the thing of like, oh, yeah, oh, Jack the Ripper, yeah, we'll solve these murders, but it's just whores getting killed. It's that sad element of the time, but it's kind of showing that like, oh, we're only concerned about Malady's victims because she's killing men of some worth, and they're more important than the women Jack was killing. They heavily lean into that notion on that front, but nevertheless, like I said, it's an interesting conversation. Like that group saying like, oh, the prime minister needs to comment on it, but like Lord Mastinson's like, no, the prime minister's never going to comment on it, because it's like, it's just kind of leave it as it is. Well, it's like we're going to keep an eye on it, but the prime minister doesn't need to take a stance on it, because I think it's a thing of if you take a stance on it, it becomes a bigger thing. Like I think they want to keep it quiet enough so they can figure out what's what, so they can plan their own form of attack. Like I don't know, like I guess that's a group of high officials kind of gathering, like whether they're like a secret society group of officials or whether it's just a more official group of officials like meeting, whatever the case may be. Once again, we kind of start off by getting introduced to Amalia, and what I think is so interesting too is like the thing at the beginning, like before the 3-year time skip, I was like, oh, she just walked into water. She tried to kill herself. We still don't even know what that was all about, like why she did that. But the fact is that, now it seems like she has this thing where like she likes sleeping on the water. I don't know. Like, I guess it makes her feel like I don't know. It might have to deal with her powers, which I didn't talk about this, but they call it, what is it? What is your, God, what is it? True? I forgot what the word was. There's a specific word to talk about what your ability is. I don't think it's something of that nature. I just don't remember what it was. Oh, I'm so mad at it, because it's been a couple hours since I saw the episode, so I'm not remembering what it was. But it was a very specific word on what they said like your ability is. And obviously hers is, she has premonition, but it's like very small, out of context stuff, so you can't always foresee it. I thought it was interesting because like later, I think Cousins had said, Dr. Cousins had said like, oh, like ripples or something like that. Because what's interesting is like obviously with her premonition, she kind of sees herself. Well, obviously things are from her perspective, because she saw it at the beginning when she was like, oh yeah, like laying on her back and like the kids were looking at her. Once again, out of context. I don't know. There's like I'm curious, like, because it seems like her powers, like whether or not everyone else has this, it seems like she has a drawback to her powers, or maybe it's a byproduct of her circumstances of when she got her powers, being underwater, or maybe like I said, it's multiple of that light hitting her. Whatever case may be, like she's twitching her fingers a lot, like she gets a little antsy. It seems like loud noises and stuff like that. I don't know. Like I think if she doesn't focus all the time, she probably could easily get lost in it maybe. So she has to kind of probably fight back, like getting drawn into it sometimes. I don't know. Like that's just me reading. I could be reading too much into it, but like I'm curious what that is. Like the whole like when she's like tapping her fingers, like I think maybe that's her way of trying to like keep herself present, try to keep herself focused and grounded. But I'm also wondering, is that why she lays on the floor too? Because it's supposed to do that. It's kind of the cold hard floor to make her like, okay, I'm here. I'm on solid ground. I'm okay. Because obviously she wasn't okay. We don't know what the circumstances were of why she tried to kill herself. But also we get introduced to Penance as well. Obviously they're partners in this. And Penance's whole thing, and I love that we kind of learn about it later on, is that basically she's an inventor. Which I thought was an interesting line too, where she was like, it's like, oh, she's a creator. It's like, and she corrected him all like, oh, well, I'm a creator. There's only one creator. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. So I mean, I think this is probably a God-fearing time, still a God-fearing time frame. So, but it's also interesting too that, like, and I think that speaks volumes. Where it's like, yeah, she's a lady of science, but she's also like, a woman of faith. She could just be saying that because it's like, right, people already look at us crazy enough as to touch. If I kind of was like, you start throwing out there like, oh, creator, like, no, don't try and put me on the same level as God. There's only one creator. So I'm assuming she just is legitimately just a woman of faith or whatever. But I'm curious, was that maybe just her just trying to like, whoa, don't try and confuse people to make them think like I'm a creator. And no, I'm just a creator. There's only one, So like that distinction, that means something, to her. I thought that was so interesting. But essentially, she basically kind of sees energy like electricity, and that basically she can see how it wants to come together. And I guess her mind eye, it's almost like basically energy speaks to her, and she's able to kind of communicate with it and knows how to fit it and put it in ways. Because she's the tech person. She's the one that came up with the vehicle that they escaped doing at one point in time. It kind of reminded me of like Dark Knight, how like the Bat bike came out of the Batmobile. It kind of reminded me of that. I thought it was kind of pretty interesting. We saw that in the trailer, but obviously all the tech is 100% her. So once again, it's interesting how it manifests itself, where it's like some powers are more obvious than others. Like Amalia's and hers, you wouldn't know, like, because I think that's also a rumor too, because Augustus, it's like, oh, but what if they're deformed? It's like, I guess he's never been around any touched, so he doesn't know that, like, at least from what we've seen, no one's been altered on that level. They look like regular people, but it's just they also have special abilities. But I guess that's kind of like the propaganda that goes around of just like, oh, the touched are so scared. Oh, they look like regular people. Oh, but there's something more to them, because obviously, what's the little girl they go to save early in the episode? I want to say, I think it's like Myrtle or something like that. The one who's speaking different languages. Because at first her mom's 100% believing it to be satanic. Her dad's just kind of like, oh, like if you can help or something like that. He's not as like sure and passionate about it. Like he's very kind of somewhat even killed her about the whole thing. But it turns out she's speaking different languages. And it's like she can no longer, I think, speak just right. She can understand English, but she just can't speak it. Like I think like her, like maybe that's going to be something once she kind of understands and better has control over her ability, she'll be able to kind of speak whatever language. But once again, it's interesting. I mean, once again, very comparing it to Haven, like not every affliction was something where it's like, oh my god, it's a destructive ability. You have people like Nathan who just, oh yeah, I don't feel anything. Like that was his trouble. So it's kind of that thing of like, not everything is like this auspicious ability of like destruction. It's like, no, they're more subtle in some cases. Like, once again, I think her name's the little girl Myrtle. I think that was her name. But I thought that was interesting too, how she was immediately being kidnapped at the beginning of the episode, and I love that the person behind it is the doctor from most recently he played Tyr in American Gods. So I thought that was interesting. Like, you're kind of a little shady as Tyr, and now here you are as this shady character who's apparently kidnapping trope. I was touched. I did it right there, because it doesn't help that I'm up here comparing and contrasting stuff to Haven 2. That's going to make things worse with trouble touch. Ugh. Nevertheless, God, what was I about to say? Oh, right, that he's trying to understand it on some level. It's like he wants to cut into trouble touched. Damn it! I forewarned you. I knew I was going to do it. The touched, he wants to get inside of their heads, cut them open to see just how it comes about and how it works. I don't know whether it's because he's trying to find a way to replicate it in those who don't have the abilities, or just something else. I'd assume with a situation like this is like, oh, how do I get some of that? Like, I assume it has to be that, but we'll have to ultimately wait and see. But it's also interesting too, because I was wondering if her combat skills, Amalia, kind of going back to it really quickly, I was wondering if her combat skills were related to her powers. It's like, no, it just seems like she's just a badass that's like well trained in fighting and stuff like that, and also using like penances like tech, the umbrella that kind of electrocutes, and then like bring off part of it, like the bottom of it, to be like almost like a brass knuckle, but it's like an electrical metal knuckle or something. And it's just like, man, it's just, and that, like that transition from that was like pretty like swift. But it's like, because one of them is like one of the people back at the orphanage is like, oh, I'm gonna teach the others kind of how to defend themselves, how to fight. So I don't know if she taught Amalia, or is Amalia self-taught? Like, many questions on that front. But also, like, luckily they were able to say, once again, I think her name's Myrtle. I looked it up, and I think it's Myrtle, but I can't, once again, it's been a couple hours since I saw the episode. A lot of stuff happened in between, so I'm not remembering as much as I should. Do apologize. I was about to say, is it Myrtle or is it Muriel? I think it's Myrtle, if I'm not mistaken. Once again, regardless, that's kind of beside the point. But we do get to meet the rest of, the orphanage. Like, seeing, like, we meet the one that's, like, super tall. She's the only one we know what she can do. The others we're unaware of. So obviously, Dr. Cousins, we get more of an idea what he's capable of. Like, basically, like, almost like his fingers are basically the instruments as he like can like stitch wounds together just with his powers in his hands. So, and it's like, even Amalia, it seems like there might be something there. They had this like moment of just like silence between them looking at each other. Like, I don't know whether it was like something in the past. Maybe it's always been a will they, won't they type of thing, or I don't know. But I thought that was really interesting. It was just kind of like, and then they just kind of move about their business. But once again, I love that line of the lesson my mom taught me is, if you can look a man in the eye, you can stab him. And it's like, oh, that's kind of a good lesson to know. And then Penance is like, yeah, but don't do that. Don't do that. But obviously, like, Amalia had that vision about the opera. So it's like, oh, we're going to go to the opera because she figures it's all connected. She just doesn't know how. And so Lavinia, obviously, like, she's the backer. She's the person that looks at, as like Massens had brought up earlier, like, she's the one that kind of looks at them as like someone that these are people who are kind of outcasts that need to be welcomed there, and then there are those who kind of fear. So she's the one that's kind of a little more open armed, that the touch should be kind of acclimated into society and not just kind of be shoved off and treated differently. But she's the one behind the orphanage and stuff like that, and Amalia is the one who kind of, I think, runs things on a more day-to-day basis. Lavinia being Augustus's sister, and it seems like they have a complicated relationship because Hugo talks about the fact is, I mean, I get it, but he's like, yeah, your sister kind of bosses you around a bit. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He's someone that kind of views the world in a certain way, because I think that's why he kind of gets along with Hugo, because Hugo's just kind of a weirdo. Seems like he's just kind of a sex addict. Seems like it's like, oh, you got like this sex club and everything. It seems like he wants Augustus for something. It's like something about Augustus for him. It's like, oh, we'll fit the, it's about, it'll be right. And it's like, oh, and he's telling the lady, oh, you had to put that back on. Oh, right. You're the actual maid, so it makes sense you're wearing the maid outfit. Never mind. We also had like that murder taking place that was Detective Monday's looking into, and it was made to look like it was Malady, but he was able to quickly see through it. And I was like, how'd you know it wasn't her? Yeah, because she can actually spell. It's like Behold was spelled wrong, and so was Angel. It was supposed to be Angel, but it's read Ankle. But also it just didn't line up, because for him it's like the body, it had been moved, like this wasn't where she was murdered, and like this blood, I guess the blood was like more dry than the rest of the body or something like that. So it's like whoever murdered her set this whole thing up, and it's like you're covering up for this. And for him it's like that's what's irritating, because it's like, I'm doing this because I'm getting justice for her, like I'm doing this for her, and you interfere. Like I don't get, I guess, why complicate what I was missing, the misunderstanding, like the reason why he would do that. Like, why would he like try? I mean, I guess it's easier just dependent on Malady, but like, why though? Like it's like, I don't think you committed the murder, but I think you're covering it up for whatever reason. Because I guess it's like them doing their job and stuff like that. I guess that's why, because he was like, damn it, if someone on my crew down here during the mines and stuff like that did that, then it's going to shut operations down. They have a schedule to keep and stuff like that. So I guess that's why he wanted to make it seem like Malady. So it would take the investigation would take Monday. So I was about to call him Wednesday. Would take Monday somewhere else. but he's very persistent. They also, because it seems like he's also the type of person, hey, I deal with stuff more so like with my fists. It's kind of how the dude was kind of like talking mad shit, being like, oh yeah, you're the one who kind of like lets your fist talk first type of thing. So maybe I think we're definitely going to be spending a lot more time with Monday, and I'm sure he's going to be interacting quite a bit with the touch, in particular Amalia. But obviously, like, there's a whole situation with the Beggar King, who's played by Nick Frost, which I'm like, yeah. I want to say Into the Badlands is the last thing I saw Nick, is the most recent thing I've seen Nick Frost in. Not that he hasn't done it, it's just like, that's just, you know, especially with his head shaved like that, it makes me think of Baji, you know. But nevertheless, he's kind of a sinister dude and stuff like that. I guess the Beggar King isn't like his official name, because like Penance called him that, and she was almost like, oh my god, why did I call you that in front of your face? But for him, it's like, Amalia is really smart. It's like, okay, you need my help, because it's like, okay, the only people who knew about the untouched, the touch, I don't even know why I said untouched. Very different term. Well, I mean, I guess that can almost borderline. I mean, that could be the parallel they're going for. This is like the touched, as in like, you know, paralleling it to the real world with the whole untouched. Those who are kind of seen like unsightly and kind of diseases, like, oh, don't touch him type of thing. So I think maybe that's kind of like the angle they're going for. But I kind of lost my train of thought. Right. Amalia figured like we knew about it, and this mysterious group knew where to find the touch we're looking for at the same time. The Beggar King's the one who gave us the information, so maybe he's the one that gave it to them as well. And now, you know, it's like essentially he was like, my business is my business, so you don't have to worry about that. But also, what was that? The conversation was so damn good. I wish I could remember all of it. But essentially it came down to, he realizes that Amalia called him out very publicly, like had their meeting publicly so that people know that they're meeting, because this way that everyone knows they're working together. So if anyone's coming after anyone from the orphanage and the touch, they might as well come after him as well, because he's associated. So she's kind of put a target on his back. So protecting us protects you in the end. So, you know, and it's also like, you know, whatever you want, we'll pay the price. And it's like, he's like, well, can you give me the crown jewels? And then Penance and Amalia kind of look at each other. He's like, wait, you're actually considering it? It's like, well, we got this particular self-riding carriage, which we saw that earlier in the episode, which I thought was pretty dope. Kind of like that the driver, I was like, is the driver going to end up not being human? Turned out not to be human, ended up being a robot, but, automated at the very least. But, it's like, yeah, we'll have one specified for you, plus, you know, stuff at a later date. He's like, fine. But he puts the blade up to her face, and it's like, you're someone that's mad enough to get it done, but you're also someone mad enough to try and squirm your way out of this. And if you try that option, I will cut your face. And then we had that, like, the most badass moment of her just kind of leaning her face on the blade, and she's like, go ahead, it's not my face. This isn't my face, or something like that. And I'm like, what the hell? What does that mean? Does she mean that literally, or does she mean that figuratively? Because part of me is more like, because we saw Massen's daughter pass out at the end, part of me was like, did her subconscious get put in Amalia's body? Is that what that is? Like, could it be like a mind transfer? Like, could it be like, it's kind of a 2-in-1 with Amalia? I don't know. Like I said, the fact that she said that, like I said, I don't know if that's metaphorical or that's literal. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that line, but it was such a badass line, but it makes you go, what does that mean? What does it mean? You know, so they go to the opera, and I thought that was kind of an interesting conversation between Massens, Lavinia, as well as Amalia about, you know, words. Because for him, he's like, you know, employed, why mess with such good Anglo-Saxon words? Well, not Anglo-Saxon, just Anglo. Well, might be Anglo-Saxon. The words, like, why mess with such words? Why, when we have the word employed, why would we include the word employee? And it's like, you know, and then you have her kind of disseminate, like, bringing up the information of like, well, employee just can mean a large number of people, or as employee singles someone out. It's a word that exists to show that someone isn't, basically, paraphrasing here, just a cog in the machine. It shows that this person isn't just part of the group, that they are an individual person representing who they are, that they're not just someone, a faceless cog in the machine. They are a person. They have kind of value. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, like, discussion of words. Because I also love Augustus being like, what's wrong with you? And then, like, Hugo and Lavinia are looking at him like, what the hell is your problem? Because he's looking at, you know, Amalia and Penance and like, oh, he thought they'd be disformed or something like that, disfigured. And it's like, oh, no, you're actually beautiful, stunning women. Like, what's wrong with you, you know? But obviously during the performance, they end up finding out that, well, at least Penance turned and saw that he was like being touched by the siren song as well, so he's, you know, touched as well. What his ability is, we don't know. He probably doesn't even know yet. But it was interesting, Malady, like her showing up like that. I'm like, she just sounded stark craving mad. I have no idea what the hell she was talking about, but I'm assuming it has to deal with what gave them their powers. It, based on the ending, it makes it seem like she's the only one who remembers, because even Massens is kind of suggesting, like, the word they use is like, oh, is you think this is some kind of mongrel attack or something like that, their words, but basically making it seem like someone else did this, that this is like some other country or some other group is doing this, not like, oh, this is an alien thing necessarily. So, because what we saw at the end is like, oh, the ship passed by, and then everyone was kind of like, oh, and then everyone was like, oh yeah, back to the day. I was like, wait, no one remembers except Malady. I think maybe because she was already a little deranged, it might be a situation that because of the way her mind is, her mind might be kind of shattered or fractured to the point that like it couldn't be completely erased from her mind like it is everyone else's. I mean, we don't know, like, but it seems like Malady might be the only one, because she's referencing like seeing God and, you know, God brought me here, but she's like, I don't know why, like referencing like she's looking for an angel. She's like, I slit the devil's throat and everything like that, but I'm like, I think that's what she's referencing. I think she's the only one who remembers. There was also an interesting line of dialogue where it turns out not all of the touched are in London. London, some of them are overseas. Not because it went that far spread. It's just that some of those people left sometime afterwards. So that's why they're touched potentially outside, elsewhere in the world. You know, it's kind of very similar. Interesting comparison to make would be like on The Flash. You will have, you know, metahumans pop up other places, you know, like Starling City, even though everything went down in Central City type of thing. It's like all the metahumans were born from Central City from the particle accelerator explosion, but they, you know, they left afterwards, so that's why you can get metahumans like all over the world at that point. It's kind of something in a similar vein of that I thought was interesting. But also, once again, showing you Amalia being the badass that she is. She's jumped down. I love Penance being like, oh no, she fell. Because I guess it's like, oh, if she ends up showing off those badass moves, it's going to be like, I guess that's to kind of hide the fact is so everyone doesn't know she's touched. It's just like, I guess it's just, she wants to kind of hide it and be like, oh no, she fell. It was an accident. Oh, she wasn't like doing that on purpose because she's the badass that she is. And then proceeded to like kick some ass. But you even see Madden's looking at her, kind of like her display of everything. I'm wondering what Home Dude on stage really like, because it looked like it was technology he was using, because he literally fired bullets into the crowd. That didn't look like there was a touch situation. It was just like tech he had. I'd actually looked her name up. It's Bonfire, the one who can literally summon fire. So her with Malady. I also love they walk past Hugo, and I love the lady that's with Hugo is like, why is that still hard? I'm like, what? Didn't expect that line. But nevertheless, once again, just like Amalia kicking ass with the close quarters combat, like her and Malady going toe to toe and her doing like the tackles. I mean, hell, like I didn't talk about it, but early in the episode, she was doing some like, let's face it, some Daredevil shit, like breaking arms and limbs and, well, Daredevil / Batman stuff, like knocking people out of commission, breaking arms type of stuff. But I also like, I guess maybe because of her powers, or just maybe she's that damn skilled, her jumping down, knowing what right angle not to get caught on anything she's jumping down. Yeah, her dress got taken off, but sure, I guess that allowed her to have more mobility, because the dress was super tight anyway. Even Dr. Cousins was being like, yeah, wear the dress, it'll help, like, you know, at least be tight and snug enough that it kind of helps keep that wound of yours closed. But she went toe-to-toe with Malady, and we still don't know what Malady's power is. All we saw was, like, her eyes go red, oranges, and then she, like, started, like, headbutting. So I don't know whether it's just kind of like, I don't know. It didn't seem necessarily like superhuman strength. I don't know. I could be mistaken. It just seemed like there's a demon welling up in her, but in that moment, she just kind of pulled, at the last second, she kind of pulled it back. So Who knows? Maybe it has something to do with her, like I said, her mind being potentially what it is, combined with her power. Who knows? And like I said, I'm just so curious, like, how that works. Like, are the abilities specifically tuned to the person, and like, is it based on your personality and stuff like that? Because like Misfits, for example, like if you look at how people got certain abilities in that show, their abilities kind of reflect who they were personality wise. Like Simon always felt invisible, so he was invisible. So on and so forth. Like Simon's like a great example of that. So that's why I'm wondering, is it kind of like I said, maybe because, Penance was always had a mind for that type of stuff. Maybe it just got, heavily increased when she became touched. Whatever the case may be. So, a lot of interesting things on that front. Like I said, a great introduction. I do apologize. I was a little all over the place. Once again, it's kind of my fault for there just being so much time in between me watching the episode and recording. Usually isn't on most cases, so that way I can always like keep everything at least somewhat fresher in my mind. So I do apologize. I'll make sure to get started on recording a lot sooner. Just like I said, just other stuff came up at the time. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where things go from here. We got to talk about the elephant room. This is a Joss Whedon show. He's no longer a part of the project, but I do know that will, I don't know. It makes me feel weird. Like, I'm interested in the show, but it's also like, by watching the show, am I supporting him? But he's no longer part of the project, but it's still his project. And it's like, So that's the thing of like, I'm making my own decision on that. I'm not telling you like, oh, you have to choose one way or another. I'm not saying, it's like, no, if you decide, because he's a part of the project, you don't want to watch it or anything like that, I completely understand. I'm not going to judge your opinion. It's just like, everyone can compartmentalize and decide for themselves whether or not they want to check out the show, whether that's a deterrent or not. Like, I don't know how much of a big a deterrent that's going to be for some people when it comes to this show. I'm not bringing this up because I'm like, I'm not trying to talk about the Joss Whedon situation. That's not what I'm doing. That's not my thing. But it's just like, I'm just curious, like, how much of an effect that's going to have on people watching the show, even bothering to check the show out, because that might be a deterrent enough for people. So I'm just letting anyone know going forward, like, I will be continuing to watch the show. But I do, like I said, it does make me feel kind of like I'm kind of a little conflicted on whether. I've kind of been feeling that way since the trailers and stuff like that. I just didn't talk about it, but I figured I'd just take this opportunity to kind of talk about it here. But like I said, I'm going to continue the show, but if someone decides like, I can't, either just because, hey, the show's just not your thing, that's cool, or you're just like, just Joss Whedon, his name being anywhere, all of it. Even I was kind of like, yeah, it does say created by, written by, directed by, it's like, back to back like that. It's like, it's a complicated situation in that front of like, it's like I said, he's no longer part of the project, but it's still his baby. So, once again, just stuff coming out. I'm like I said, I'm not going to get on anyone's case for feeling a certain way. That's all I'm going to say about it. So, like I said, not trying to judge anyone one way or the other. Just wanted to kind of include that as part of the conversation. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.